In this video, we will go through the 4 key training principles that you need to be aware of. This is what drives results. From the first day you set your foot in the gym till the last day of your training career, this is what matters the most. Number 1 is something called progressive overload. Progressive overload is basically just making improvements over time. As long as you're getting better, it means that you're progressively overloading the muscle. You can do it by adding more and more weights and lifting heavier over time. You can do it by adding more reps with the weights that you're already using. It still means that you're making progress and getting stronger. You can even do it simply by improving your technique and getting better at executing the exercise. It happens so many times that my clients send me a video of them performing an exercise, and when I correct all of the flaws in their technique, all of a sudden they start getting better pumps, they start getting more muscle soreness, which means that muscle is getting it. You're making the exercise more challenging without having to lift heavier weights or having to do more reps. You're simply adding more stress to the muscle by performing the exercise in a better way. Here's an example of how you can do this. You can slow down the negative part of the rep. You can increase the range of motion by, for example, using parallettes when doing push-ups. That will allow you to go much deeper, making the exercise more challenging and more effective. You can also add pauses in the stretched position. For example, when you're doing some sort of squats or lunges, you can pause at the bottom for 2 seconds. This will make it so much harder. Another way is to do more sets. So for example, if you're doing 2 sets of bench press, you can start doing 3 sets. As long as you're making improvements in any of these areas, you are progressively overloading the muscle, and the muscle has to adapt by getting bigger and stronger so it can keep up with the resistance that you're putting upon it each and every week you show up in the gym. You need to make sure that this is happening by putting in the effort and pushing yourself a bit outside of your comfort zone. No progress can ever be made without going through at least a little bit of discomfort. Now, I have 2 very important tips for you on how to make sure that you are constantly making this progress. Use the training sheets to track your progress. Write down how many reps you did and which weights you used for each and every set. So let's say that today you were doing bench press. On the first set you used 50 kilograms and you did 6 reps. Now when you show up to the gym next week, you can see how you performed the last week and you can focus on trying to beat those numbers. Before you start your set, you can look at your sheet and say, last week I did 6 reps with 50 kg. Let's try to do 7 reps this time. And you constantly do that. You constantly try to beat the previous record. You constantly try to get better, to make improvements. But if you're not using these sheets and you're not tracking your progress, you will forget how many reps you did the last week. You will probably forget even which weights you used. If you're not tracking, you're slacking. Second tip that will allow you to make progress is to use the proper amount of rest between sets. In your sheet, you should be able to find what is the proper amount of rest after a certain exercise, depending on how systemically fatiguing this exercise is. So for a bit more complex movements like squats, for example, you will need a bit more time to rest between sets. For isolation exercises like biceps curls or side lateral raises, you don't really need much time to rest between sets. Your goal is to make sure that you're completely recovered for each set. If you're supposed to rest 2 to 3 minutes between sets according to your plan, and after 2 minutes you just don't feel like you're ready to go, then don't do it. Wait for another minute until you're fully recovered. Or on the other hand, if you are fully recovered after 2 minutes, there's no need to waste your time and rest any longer. In case you're doing exercise that works only one side at a time, for example, Bulgarian split squats, what you can do is rest for 1 minute when it's time to switch legs. I always take that into consideration when I create workout plans. That way you will prevent that running out of breath is the limiting factor, and you can make sure that the leg muscles are being pushed to its limit. So, the point of the rest between sets is that you are 100% recovered and ready to give your best performance on the next set, which will create a better chance for progressive overload to occur. Another key training principle is called mind to muscle connection. You know that for every single exercise tutorial, I explain which muscle is being worked, when to feel it contracting, when to feel it stretching. I even show you all these muscle animations and how the muscle looks while you're performing these movements. There's a reason why I do that. It's not for nothing. You need to understand the basic biomechanics. You need to focus on feeling the muscle working while you're performing an exercise, not just going through the motions, but training with intention. Of course, you're not going to be able to perfectly connect with the muscle from the first day in the gym. This is something that takes time and experience, but it's important that you invest some effort into trying to feel it. It's like meditation. Like stop thinking what you're gonna have for dinner. Stop thinking about the girls or whatever it is that occupies your mind. Focus on what you're doing. Try to imagine how the muscle that is being worked is contracting in order to move the weights. Slowing down the tempo on the negative can help you improve your mind to muscle connection. Also, when the muscle is completely contracted, you can feel it much better. Number 3, focus on the deep stretch. When muscle is being challenged in the lengthened position, few things will happen. First, this will create an enormous muscle stimulus. It seems to grow the muscle much faster according to many studies. That's already a good reason to make an emphasis on that deep stretch and to make sure that you're not skipping this part of the movement. Second, you get to improve your mobility. So let's take ankle mobility as an example. Many people can't squat deep enough because they lack ankle mobility. The way to improve that mobility is to squat as deep as you can and pose at that deep position and allow the weights to push you down even deeper. This is going to stretch you out even further, and over time it's going to improve your ankle mobility. There's no need to do any additional ankle mobility exercises. This is quite literally all you need to improve your mobility. The final, and I would argue the most important reason to make an emphasis on that deep stretch is to reduce the chance of getting injured. Doing slow negatives and making poses at the stretched position make the exercise more challenging. This will allow you to use the lighter weights, otherwise you won't be able to do as many reps as you usually do. So using lighter weights will put less stress on your joints, plus it's very hard to get injured by using the lighter weights. So this is very bad for your ego, but very good for your joints health and long-term muscle gains. You don't want to risk getting injured, trust me on this one. And the final training principle to keep in mind is the stimulus to fatigue ratio. Once you get a bit more advanced, everything that you do in the gym will be based on this. So this is not something that is going to bother you too much if you are just getting started, but it's good to understand it. I'm going to give you an example so you understand what it means. Let's take conventional deadlift as an example. When you perform a set of deadlifts, the fatigue is extremely high because it's a very challenging exercise. Your entire body is involved in the movement. You can lift super heavy weights, and that's why the fatigue is also very high. Maybe your shoulders are hurting you because you're pulling very heavy weights. You're breathing like crazy because your cardiovascular system is pushed very far. You're mentally drained because it's a very challenging set. Your entire system is fatigued. What about the stimulus? Well, since your entire body is involved in the movement, you don't really know what is the limiting factor. You don't know which muscle is exactly being pushed to failure, and it's very likely that your whole body just being exhausted is the reason why you stop your set. So the stimulus is low, the fatigue is high, This means that conventional deadlift is just not an ideal exercise for muscle growth. Okay, let's take another example. Let's say you're a guy that likes to push yourself very hard in the gym and takes every single set to failure or even beyond. This may give you an incredible amount of stimulus. It's very good for muscle growth, but guess what it's also good for? It's good for destroying your joints. It gives you an insane amount of fatigue. So now you need to figure out if this is a good trade-off for you, because everyone is different. Some guy that has joints of steel may be able to endure this type of training for a very long time. Someone else might do it for 3 weeks and already be in a desperate need to take a week off because the amount of fatigue that has been accumulated over these 3 weeks is just too high. That's why it's good for you to understand this, so you know how to adjust your own training intensity appropriately. Just think in terms of stimulus to fatigue ratio. If you're a beginner or maybe even an intermediate, you probably don't have to worry too much about this because you're still not strong enough to create such a high amount of fatigue. You will probably need to take a deload every 10 to 16 weeks, and that's only if you're pushing yourself very hard in the gym and you are very consistent. So how do you know it's time for you to take a deload? Here's how. Your body will give you signs that it's time to take a step back and relax a little bit. Your joints might start hurting a little bit. Your performance in the gym drops, so if you're using our sheets to track your progress, you are definitely going to notice that all of a sudden you are getting so much weaker. When this happens, you can quite literally just take a week off, relax and do whatever you want. The other way to do it is to simply just cut everything in half. So cut the weights that you're using in half and cut your reps in half. You can also cut the number of sets that you're doing in half. So this is how it's usually done if you don't want to take a week off. Anyways, anyone who's taking their training very seriously is eventually going to reach the point where deload is required. The more advanced you become, the more this is going to happen, which is exactly why you need to take extra care and think about the stimulus to fatigue ratio. Okay guys, I'm getting way too boring with this. I'm sure that most of you are either gone or sleeping by now, so I'm just gonna end it here. Keep in mind that you can always consult with me regarding anything if you're watching this video from the inside of my coaching platform. If all of this was too much for you to digest, you can always come back to this video and re-watch it, or you can simply talk to me in person and ask me if there is any type of help that you need. Thank you guys for your attention, and now let's go and make some gains.